A common question about unconventional educational models, and especially about self-directed ones that put young people in charge of their own education, is how do kids turn out? To help answer that question, I've invited Evan Hughes, who attended the renowned Sudbury Valley School in Framingham, Massachusetts for his childhood and adolescence, and now sends his son there as well. Regular listeners to this podcast know that 3 of my children also attend Sudbury Valley. Sudbury Valley School was founded in 1968 and has since inspired the creation of dozens of Sudbury-model schools around the world. It prioritizes non-coercive, self-directed education within a democratically run community where adults and children have equal say in school operations, rulemaking and enforcement, hiring and firing decisions, and so on. There are no adult-imposed classes, no grades, no curriculum or top-down evaluative measures. So how exactly does a person learn in this environment? Evan is here to share his experience growing up as a self-directed learner at Sudbury Valley School. Evan Hughes, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I feel liberated already.
Great. Well, it's so great to talk with you and have you share your experience as a student and an alum of Sudbury Valley School, and also as a parent now of a learner who is at Sudbury Valley. So you graduated from Sudbury Valley School in 1996. I'd love for you to start off by telling us about your experience as a student at Sudbury Valley. You know, how did your family discover Sudbury Valley? What was it like as a student there?
You know, it's funny to talk about it. When you're in it, it's hard to talk about it because if you ask a fish what water feels like, we know what water feels like as a person because we just jumped in it and then we're out of it thinking about that experience. So I think if I go back to that time, I was just living life. My family, my mother was a voracious reader, always reading. And she read some of John Holt's work, Growing Without Schooling, things of that nature, and said, I'm not sending these kids to public school. I'm just not doing it. So my brother and my sister and my brother and I went together. I started at age 10, and we were homeschooled before that. He was 8 years old, and I felt like a fish being dropped into a pond. I guess I'm using water analogies today, but it was like, oh, this is me. I'm doing this. And my sister was young. She was 3 when we started, and then a year later, she joined at age 4. And you're growing up. You know, when you're a kid, you're just doing it. You know, you find your interests, and you find people. You know, I remember a moment with my son. He was 4 years old, and we're having all these brilliant father-son moments, and we were at an event, and he went, kids, and took off. And I just felt like, okay, I'm not in this moment, dad is not important. What's important is your peers. And it was so genetic. It was so innate within him. There are people that are my size doing my stuff to interact with, you know? And so, you know, Sudbury Valley is, the exact age is not as important, right? It's, are the people doing the things that you're doing and creating those links, learning to communicate and glean from each other what you're doing. And I've continued to do that professionally. I have a large roster of other doctors that I reach out to across the country. Actually, I go to seminars, and I'm actually known as someone who brings groups together. Probably started in Sudbury Valley, and now I'm doing it professionally.
Yeah. So Evan, maybe we could talk a little bit about that, because you are a chiropractor. You have your own chiropractic practice where you see patients. And so that sort of leads to this other question about self-directed education in general and Sudbury Valley School in particular is, how do you actually learn in an environment where you're not being taught conventional subjects in a conventional way? But clearly it worked out for you because you're, successful in your chosen path. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah. And I've wondered about that the entire process of doing pre-med and then grad school. I've watched how I did it differently from other people. And when I first got in there was an ice water feeling of like, an exam. What are you talking about? I remember I got a 60 on my first biology exam. I said, this is great. They said, no, if you keep doing that, you fail. I went, what are you talking about? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I understood, right? But emotionally, it was like, why are we doing an exam? This is stupid, right? But I adapted. I wrote a really kick butt paper, and that got me just to my best C I ever got in my life. Okay. Then the next semester, I went to a community college to do my pre-med. and I ended up with an A in anatomy and an A plus in psychology. So it's like I figured out the game, and a lot of it was studying with other people. And there was a woman, Jill Gregnafini. She was a woman. She and I, uh, concentration, this and that, but kind of flighty by nature, right? A little bit active brains. But we got together and we made friends. And it turns out when we studied together, we just had the zeitgeist where we were able to push each other. And we stayed together for anatomy too. And we both ended up with A plus. I forget her chosen profession. I haven't seen her for like 20 years. But I found somebody I could connect with. And then I did that pretty much for each and every class. And I remember I took chemistry one summer, did summer classes, and they put me in regular chemistry, and then I called the chiropractic school, grad school, and they said, no, you need the advanced chemistry. I'd already had a week, and I was welcomed into the new class, very kind professor, with an exam on stuff that I only knew the basics of. The second best C I ever got in my life, because then I was able to bring it up. But I remember that summer, I didn't have all the basic math. There was a quadratic equation that I'd never seen before. So I hauled my butt over to the tutoring center and said, someone needs to teach me a quadratic equation. And it turns out there's a ton of people ready to help you learn what you need to learn. So I ended up learning math and chemistry at the same time, because you just do it, right? And so the idea that you're going to sequentially build these things is that isn't. Humans jump in consciousness. I don't know if you've noticed this as a parent, but your kids, it's not linear. We go boom and we understand stuff, and then you muddle with it for a while, and then it goes boom. So that was my experience. And when I got to grad school, there was another level of pressure, because you're dealing with more intention, but also more expectation. Same thing. I got together with study groups. I reached out to peers, but also reached out to professors. Every professor knew my name. I was not the quiet one in the back. And that isn't just, Evan, Captain Extrovert. All the Sudbury Valley students have a similar story. Whether they're in the workforce or whether they're doing academia, whatever it is, everybody seems to know who they are, because they know how to step into an environment and be with people, right? And I think that's the most important skill, and that my son knows how to open and close conversations and connect with people. Is like, no, that's the human superpower right there. And then learning perseverance and a stubbornness, the will, the discipline to just drive ahead, that emerges naturally by finding what interests you. How many of us suffer for our art form? Well, we do, and we do it gladly. And Sudbury Valley gives the freedom to figure out, what do you want to suffer for? And I love the word suffering. I was talking with some doctors with this about the other day. I actually teach doctors how to do reported findings and x-ray readings and things of that nature. And I couch it this: so we're all here to suffer, because that's what causes us to grow. You do push-ups, man, that's suffering. So what do you want to suffer for to improve, so you can enjoy the fruits on the other side? That's what Sudbury Valley will give you, plus the ability to interact with people. To me, that's a complete education to start.
So the idea with Sudbury Valley is that when young people are working towards a goal, or as you said, sort of finding, their passion or their interest, what are they willing to suffer for, to kind of put in the hard work and persistence to accomplish something that's meaningful to them, then, it's worth doing that work. It's meaningful to learn chemistry and math at that time in pursuit of that goal.
Yeah.
But some, those who might not be familiar with this model might be listening and watching and saying, well, it just sounds like you're creating more obstacles for young people, right? Like, why not just make it a little bit easier for them and put them on the path when they're, children and adolescents, to learn math and learn chemistry, kind of be on this conventional path, so that you're not just sending them out to the world without that knowledge to begin with. What would you say?
Yeah, and I remember when I was 15 years old at Sudbury Valley, I was concerned I was behind. And some of that was my nature, but I think now that I've been through the years enough, around that age is when you start to worry about measuring up, and I wondered, maybe, how would I do over there? And my son has expressed that to me at 13. He's interested in how he might do at another school. And it's a deep question without a simple answer. I would say that the struggling with freedom is the hard choice. That's the harder path that yields the greater power. And And the other thing about it that's interesting is there's an idea that you need to finish up your education on time by 18, select a college, get it right now, okay, and then immediately start so you can hurry up and graduate. Okay, what if, what if you gave yourself an entire year to catch up with the skills you needed to get into college? Now, this doesn't actually ever happen, but it's an interesting thought exercise. What if you gave yourself time to fill in the gaps that you needed now that you know what you want to do? Right? The game changes. Some people choose chiropractic as a second career. They were a programmer or something, or they were an athlete, and they decided they found chiropractic and they said, I want to do this. These people don't have trouble with grades. These people do not have trouble with discipline because they've done the other stuff. They're like, no, now I know what it's like to find the thing that's worth dialing into, right? So there's no hesitation versus someone who's swimming in academics and they're what do they call it? A well-rounded education. The first time I heard that, a well-rounded academic education, that was the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time. It's not well-rounded to spend all your time with books. Love me some books, love the deep dive into difficult subjects, but you gotta do, right? You gotta take that brain juice and apply it to something to find out what you're doing. So in some respects, it's actually easier because you've tackled the hard problem. What inspires me? I learned the quadratic equation, right? I got through, what is it, organic chemistry. That's the brutal one. That's the big gatekeeper in pre-med that has caused some people not to be able to become doctors. And I found it. I said, nope, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it no matter what, you know? And even in becoming an entrepreneur, I've been a business owner for almost 20 years now. Every entrepreneur has had the experience where you want to pull the blanket over your head, you're sobbing at 3 a.m. because you're a failure and everything's about to go to pot. You're not going to make it. And all of us entrepreneurs are going, yeah, I remember when that happened to me. And somehow you get past it, you adapt, and you figure out what you need to do. I think adaptation is the other prime skill, in addition to talking to other people. But do you have the ability to pivot? No, I have to do this now. Oh, looks like it requires this, you know? And it's, if you're just slogging away subject after subject, did you ever have to make a pivot? And the answer is maybe not. Versus when you get into the world, there's going to be a moment required where you have to make a big shift.
Yeah, and it's really Sudbury Valley that fosters that sense of personal agency and autonomy and tenacity to go after whatever goals you set for yourself in life and to be able to pivot, as you said, to adapt. If you have a new goal or a different passion, then you feel like you have the capacity to achieve a goal in that area as well, that nothing's holding you back. And I think
you've done it before. That's the other one is oh, this is the time I mastered something hard. Now I will master this thing that is hard by my own volition.
Yeah, and I think it also exposes how much wasted time often exists in conventional educational environments. I love the part of the book Free at Last that was written by Sudbury Valley School co-founder Daniel Greenberg. He wrote it in the late 1980s to commemorate the school's first 20 years. And one of the parts of that book that stands out, and I'd recommend anybody read it or listen to the audiobook that's narrated by Mimsy Sadovsky, one of the other co-founders of the school. But he says that it takes about 20 hours for a child to learn the entire elementary school math curriculum when they're ready and eager to learn that. 20 hours. But we spend so many hours sort of pushing all of this content on kids that's boring to them, that's often meaningless to them, that's inauthentic, which is why, sort of all this drudgery associated with math and why a lot of people internalize a belief that they're not good at math. And he had found and writes about in Free at Last, that really it only takes about 20 hours when a child is ready and motivated to learn the entire elementary school math curriculum. And you're kind of a living testament to that of, later on when you decided on a particular goal, you learned math, you learned chemistry, you learned what you needed to know in a relatively short period of time because it was aligned with your particular goals.
100%. I got a Danny story for you.
Oh, please.
So Danny was at the school. He's passed away, I believe, 3 years ago. And I'm still coming to grips with that inside, honestly. But an amazing man. So I went to him and said, I want to learn math. And he looked back at me a little bit stern. He said, why? I saw it. It's cool. I want to try it, and he could sense there was a little bit of me like, am I just trying to keep up with the Joneses? Okay. So he just wanted to make sure. So I'm learning algebra. That's where you start. And I was doing it, and he'd give me some homework to do, and I'd come back, and he'd give me some homework to do, and I'd come back, and he'd sit with me. And Danny's a PhD in physics, so it's kind of fun to talk to a dude like that. So at one point, I didn't do my homework. I missed a lesson, and I was putting it off, and I was kind of uncomfortable in the chair. And he looked at me from across the table, and he said, "Evan, I started the school, so I did not have to see that look on a student's face. You're killing me right now. Why are you doing this?" And I said, well, I really would love to learn geometry and a little bit of trig and just start to put my toe into those other subjects. He closes the book. I don't think he slid it on the floor, but he slid it aside. He said, look, he pulls out another book. We need a couple of subjects out of here, and then I'm going to teach you Pythagoras' theorem. Okay. So I learned that stuff. In Pythagoras, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where you use the right triangle to figure angles out for whatever your purposes are of that angle. So I learned the basics. I got into Pythagoras. It like fed my mind, but I had to have it pulled out. Like, what are you actually after? Right. So I did it. I learned it. I played with it. And what's funny is that after I graduated, I was working as an aquatics director in this place that had a gymnastics school, a dance studio, an indoor gym. It was a huge facility, and they needed to put a balance beam into a box truck. Okay. How big a box truck do you need? I said, I got this. I pulled out a napkin and a pen. And I had a bunch of managers gathering around as I wrote out Pythagoras' theorem on a napkin, because you take the balance beam, you do this, you get a little more space. But if you do this, you can get a smaller box truck. I wrote it all out. They all think I'm a math genius. Okay. But to your point, I was ready to learn that move at that time. So it went in permanently. It was just joyful. It was like, this is fun. Right. So it's funny when you get to math. I can do math and chemistry. I can do math and physics. I actually tutored physics for a little bit. Okay. I had to take the math placement test at the end of my pre-med. They're like, oh, you forgot to take the math placement test. I went, okay. Took it. If you do badly, it tests you into math 100. I tested into math 90. Math 90. That's like remedial NN level stuff. And I went, wait a minute. I can do the quadratic equation for chemistry and was doing all the equations associated with physics. And I realized my brain had attached the mathematics to the purpose. And so if you say, solve the problem, and I look down and I see a bunch of numbers there, I go, those numbers are pretty happy. I understand what the problem is. And my brain goes, I'm not engaged with it. I wasn't there. Now, if I needed to, let's say I wanted to get into math as a career, I would have to find a way. I'd have to pivot. But right now, no.
So what else did your classmates go on to do, Evan? We'll get into a little bit more about your experiences after Sudbury Valley, but I'm curious about some of your classmates or others that you went to school with at Sudbury Valley. What did they end up going off and doing?
Well, my brother got work as an installer of technological things for the home, like a home installer, like high level, the shades go up when you look at them, and alarms and sound systems. And he just recently became a project manager, which is a pretty big deal because you got to keep everybody else working, moving forward, answering questions. So he's training people and being head honcho for this company. So I'm very proud of my little brother, Pete. And then my sister is a performer. She can play the guitar and sing with her own way. She's now down in Tennessee, working the music scene and having fun doing that. So there's some big contrasts. Entrepreneur, dude who made it in the tech world, working for a company, and then my sister doing the performer thing. So there's a testament to us all being ourselves, after that. I have a colleague who became an Egyptologist, which is like a PhD in history, but that's kind of neat. A lot of people doing performances. There's a mathematician, Seth Connors. Got to reach out to him. I haven't talked to him for a while. Couple of musicians, business owner, owns a construction company. I think the gambit. Oh, I just spent time in London with Gillian Dujon, and I hadn't seen her for 20 years. We've stayed friends online, and she invited my son and I to come out to London with a Sudbury Valley alum. I'm like, what? They're like, we got rooms for you. Really? So they took us in for 6 days. They gave us tours around London, her and her partner, Jack. And she is a drapes master for the movie industry out there, meaning anything that doesn't go on a person that's textile, she creates. Tents, backdrops, props, and she's got a whole company with a bunch of people working for her. It was so cool to see a Sudbury Valley student who became a drapes master out of like, what even is, I needed an education even, but she's a business owner getting it done in London, darling. And yeah, that was a
That's
fantastic.
amazing. Yeah, just such a wide variety of career paths and vocations that Sudbury Valley alum can go off into, really charting their own course and being whatever it is they want to be without sort of these preconceived notions about what does success look like, or, you know, what this kind of appropriate, you know, career path should be for you, that this is something that each individual is choosing for themselves, and that they can continue to iterate throughout adulthood, that it's not just at 18 you have to decide what it is you're going to be and then you're done, that you know, have a lifetime to do that. And that was certainly your experience too. I know you were telling me that after college, before graduate school, you took some time off and traveled to Japan. You speak fluent Japanese, another sort of testament to self-directed learning. Tell us a little bit about why you chose that path.
けど、少し日本語を話します, which means I speak a little Japanese. But yeah, I always had a passion. Well, maybe it came from martial arts, you know, doing karate as a kid. But I said, whoa, I want to go. Something about Japan spoke to me. And I just, well, I got to go there. And I had met someone, again, a human connection, that said, hey, I know a language school you can go teach at. And so I studied a bunch of Japanese beforehand. I did Chinese medicine in Boston, shiatsu. And my sensei in shiatsu, the body work, taught me Japanese. And then I used to, in Sudbury Valley, I used to write on the chalkboard, the hiragana, the writing system. And so every morning I'd put that on and everyone go, oh, everyone was here. And yeah, I took some lessons, but nothing teaches you faster than speaking with humans and being able to use language to get your need met. That's when the acceleration of language comes. I remember I tried doing Japanese in college as like a side piece. My brain didn't want nothing to do with that. Versus when you go into a shop and you have a chance to communicate with people, boom, your brain fires and goes, I can use this, right? And it anchors in. So I got to do some Kyokushin karate in Japan with these big wooden doors you open up, and this is, you know, the armor in the corner and this huge wooden hall. It was like, oh, it's a kid's dream. And that was between pre-med and grad school. I went over there.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just that ability to kind of develop passions. You continue to be a martial artist, to engage in martial arts, and to be an instructor in martial arts. That's a passion that evolved from childhood and that you continue to pursue. And research on alumni from Sudbury Valley School, as well as research on unschoolers and self-directed learners, show that many times careers or adult pursuits and passions are connected to interests that were developed during childhood and adolescence, often because you had the time to experiment and try out different things and figure out what's meaningful to you and then pursue that. You know, one of the things I think about a lot, Evan, is that I feel like there's this cultural narrative that schools should be drudgery. You know, I went to K-12 public school. I know a lot of people listening and watching did the same. And there's a sort of belief like, well, no one's supposed to like school. It's supposed to be something that you just have to get through. And then you graduate and then your life begins. And I remember, you know, even though I at the time would have said that I loved school, kind of looking back, I think about what a waste of time it was, how I was always eager for school vacations and summer vacations. And it's the exact opposite of my kids' experience when they want to be at Sudbury Valley all day. They hate when weekends come. They don't like summer vacation coming because they love being there. And it's just, how do we let people know that learning and education, childhood and adolescence can and should be joyful? You know, what do you say to that?
Yeah, and I've thought about this actually this very week, that concept that you have to add duress to a child's life. And I don't know if you remember being a teenager. I'm not doing that again. That's rough. It is a rough time. Growing up is not easy, and it comes with its own difficulty. So the idea that we have to make it harder is like, no. That makes no sense. And with regards to exams, you know, they say an exam on a piece of paper that some professor thinks this is the correct answer. That isn't an exam. I'm explaining to you what an exam actually should be. Here's a cannonball, Here's some parts and pieces and some gunpowder. Get the cannonball up onto that building and have it land right there. However you want. That's an actual expression of something into the world versus a bunch of answers that the professor decides is or is not correct. You know? And so that creates a kind of duress where you are trying to figure out what someone else is thinking, what their values are and their meaning, when, by the way, they aren't being honest about it. When you write an exam, you say, well, you're bad because you didn't get the correct answer. Time out. The world is not filled with correct answers. There's something that works and something that doesn't work. Did you solve the problem? Did you not? Letting that inner creativity come out to solve your problems makes you very, very successful if you can figure out how to leverage that. You know, so the answer is life is hard enough. You don't got to make it harder. And we humans tend to find something to struggle with naturally. You know, if everything's going peaceful, you're like, I'm going to get a dog. Why would you do that? They're a mess machine, right? You got to get home, feed them. They cost you money. You'll make no money off dogs now, but we love them. We're like, actually, I'm enjoying the struggle.
Yes,
you know,
I love my dog.
Yeah, and how about having kids? What a pain in the butt they are.
Love my
Oh
kids.
my God. Yeah, you know what I mean? But it's wonderful to struggle with parenting, honestly. And sometimes it is hard, but it's like I would never trade it. It's there is joy in the struggle when it's of your own volition. You know, and even when something happens to you and you have to struggle and fight your way out of it, if it's honest, if it's something real, keeping it real, there's a feeling of accomplishment that's very deep. You know, getting an A on someone else's exam that they say good job. Well, do we really care about that? You know, well, some people do, and those people call people pleasers, right? And that's what we're reinforcing in the grading system. Please other people because they said so. I don't want my son to learn that. I want him to learn how to connect with human beings and have empathy. But you figure out how to get after it and know the struggle. So and that's another interesting thing too. Is Sudbury Valley supposed to give these kids absolutely everything for their life? I think no. I got my son into jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because I wanted him to get his butt kicked by someone not dad and experience that struggle. And it worked incredibly. And you want to talk about the antithesis. I used to run a Kung Fu school. And this Brazilian jiu-jitsu sensei, Roger Senna, Newaza Jiu-Jitsu up in Fitchburg. Love that place. I go to. And he runs such a tight ship, you know, and he will dress children down. And, you know, and some kids, their shoulders come up. They don't do that. They feel him and they sit there and they take their dressing, they take their criticism because they know he's got their back. So this is the opposite of freedom. There's no freedom in jiu-jitsu. You kidding me? You go here, do this. Every moment in that hour class is under leadership. And yet, interestingly enough, my son being given the freedom to educate himself, jumped right in and found the purpose of it. He went, oh, there's purpose of following this leadership. It's directly in line with my values. And over the last, we're coming up on a year and a half, he started, doing chin-ups. He started working on his body. He's interested in his food. All of these things coming together because he's got a goal now, right? But Sudbury Valley it isn't all of it. It's like having that contrast has value.
Right. So, we've talked a lot about the positive features of Sudbury Valley. What do you think are, some of the drawbacks to a self-directed education or Sudbury Valley in particular?
That's a good question. I'm so high on the school. I love it so much. I don't want to talk about the bad stuff, but I'm going to tell you, I think one is you're not sharing a common experience with other people. When you have to share about your school, people don't get it. And it feels like a disconnect. And you can learn how to explain it in a way that people can kind of accept your answer and move on. But there's something sweet about talking to SVS alumni that it's hard to get in other places, versus everybody complaining about exams or complaining about the school experience. Like, okay, and that's a legitimate connection you miss out on.
It's funny, Evan, I asked my 12-year-old daughter who is at Sudbury Valley that same question, if somebody asked, what do you think is the biggest drawback of Sudbury Valley, what would it be? And she basically said the same thing, that other people don't understand this type of education. They don't understand that you can learn without being forced, that you can chart your own path, that you can be joyful, that you can, learn whatever it is you want to learn and do so fully and meaningfully when it's in pursuit of your own objective. So interesting that you have the same response that she did.
Yeah, it brings up an emotion of jealousy. which is an ugly, ugly thing. So, and you can learn to work it over the years, like I have. I'd love to have some more discussions with SVS kids and even parents. This
Mm.
is how you can frame things, when a person isn't ready to hear it. And this is how you can frame it if they want to go a little bit deeper. You know.
Yeah, and you're both, right? You were an SVS kid and now you're a parent of an SVS kid. Did you always have a sense that you wanted to send your own child to SVS, or what was that decision process like for you?
It was 100% for me, always since the beginning. It was, yeah, this is it. I watched how I went and tackled what I needed to tackle, whether it was academics, whether it was entrepreneurship, all the things. And I've struggled, right? But that set, there's no question it set me up. All the things that we talked about, the autonomy, the ownership of self, of effort, of knowing that I can go get something. And I said, well, I want my son to have that too, no question. And and there was never any. I knew instantly that get the building blocks. Oh, you got to start them young. Where is that written? That's not true, right? And you got to learn sequentially. Where is that written? That's not true either. That's just things that we say. But when you actually look up into the research of the psychology, it's like, nope, humans learn explosively, especially when they're focused. So learning the hard work and the struggle, that's something I always wanted to make sure that he got. But when he got in there, I mean, I deepened my understanding of it watching him do it, finding something hard and doing it. So it
And achieving excellence. I mean, you are running a successful clinical practice as a chiropractor, really holding on to your passions and that spirit of curiosity and inquisitiveness, all the things that we say we want to instill in children to be lifelong learners. Well, what does that mean? For many people, they become pigeonholed in a certain career path or expectation of what they're good at, what they're not good at. And those limiting features just don't seem to exist at the same level for Sudbury Valley graduates and self-directed learners.
It's totally true. Another level, being an entrepreneur, I have to hire people and learning the hiring process with people who've been through the public school system. My favorite are homeschoolers. I've had one SVS kid work for me for a second. Actually, my son worked for me at 13 for a minute. He did great. I mean, that's cheating because he knows the practice and he knows me. But I will take unschoolers over graded kids any day of the week, because if I get someone who's been through the testing system, being wrong is bad. They've learned that. You get an F, that's bad, right? Versus in business, being wrong means we figured something out. Oh, we got to learn from that. That's all that means. So setting employees up to fail constructively is exactly what my jam is. You celebrate the wins when they happen, but there's certain mistakes I know they're going to make as they're learning the job. And I say, yep, you made this mistake at this time. This is why it's important. Let's come together and figure out how to make it so that gets smoothed over. And now I got a staff member who's young. She's 19 years old, another unschooler who's now taking on projects of her own volition. It's like, I'm going to take that. I think I can do those x-rays for you. Not taking them, but contrasting them. Right. She just started doing some of the billing. I'm after this. Right. But then we have an example of an unschooler.
Yeah, and I think another feature that I find in talking with Sudbury Valley graduates and those in the self-directed education space, unschoolers, is this ability to challenge assumptions, to not necessarily just go along to get along. There's this real sense of independence, and like we have been talking about, autonomy and an ability and eagerness to question. I think about one of Sudbury Valley's most famous alums, Laura Poitras, the Academy Award-winning filmmaker who was the documentary filmmaker for Citizen4, the film about Edward Snowden. She's also been nominated for several other Academy Awards, including this year, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, the story about artist Nan Goldin and the Sackler family. So someone who's really sort of challenging narratives and kind of going after the story and obviously achieving excellence in that process. And it just seems to be representative or illustrative of Sudbury Valley graduates. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of, if I think about it, I haven't heard a boring story yet. Hey, what you been up to? And it's almost like we have to catch up to each other. Are we talking Sudbury Valley? Are we talking regular? And we find, oh yeah, this is what I've been doing. Boom, boom, boom. That experience in London. I mean, that was gregarious what she's created. All of this, and people get in line with the vision. Yeah, it's nice.
And that entrepreneurial piece of it too is just being willing to take charge and be a leader. Yeah.
A willingness to take charge. That's a piece. Because if you want to do something in Sudbury Valley, you got to go get it done. You got to pull everyone together, learn to communicate, learn to inspire, learn to pitch your idea, right? Which then extends, of course, into the world. Those what you're talking about, these are foundational skills to me. And if you want, I know plenty of people that just got a job. Their lives are doing other interesting stuff, and they're just doing their work. Well, that's great. You just know that person picked that, and continuing to work on it. You said something earlier that was wonderful about needing to have it all figured out by the time you're 18. And I said, oh, come on, man. Knowing that you can pivot, knowing you got a foundation. And the other one, with the advent of technology, even over the course of my career, right, 20 years, over the course of 120 years of chiropractic, that's, it's not that much. I've seen so many changes happen where I had to change not only in business, but technically how we communicate. And so the idea that you can get a degree and be done, you have the knowledge now, that's not how that works. It's you're constantly growing and learning into your profession. Even if it's something like manual labor, you dig in a ditch, right? You're still having to interact with things that change, circumstances, new policies, new economies, new whatever's coming at you. You got to be able to take what you do and get it out effectively, and that's instinctual. I think that's very genetic, very survival. Hey, I want to do this thing with a tribe. How do we work it out? So there's a innate nature to it.
Yeah, this idea that, if you don't learn calculus by the time you're 18, you're done. Like there's no way you could learn it. Or if you haven't learned, anything that you would learn in kind of a traditional high school curriculum, then that's it. You might as well throw in the towel. When in fact, again, if we really want to raise lifelong learners, and especially to your point, the fact that learning is so much more accessible to us today due to technology, we can always be learning, and we can always be feeling like we, again, have that personal agency. So to your point, that even people who choose to have what we would consider quote unquote ordinary jobs, maybe coming out of Sudbury Valley or an unschooling environment, they know that that is what they're choosing, and that they can also pivot and do something else whenever it makes sense to them. Again, that sense of autonomy and the ability to kind of chart one's course, I think, is so crucial. So I know we don't have too much more time, Evan, and I'd love to just kind of wrap up by hearing your thoughts on why do you think other parents should consider Sudbury Valley for their children?
Awesome. There's a leap of faith that comes with doing it completely differently. So I would not downtrodden say, oh, it's a no-brainer. Oh, no, it's a brainer. You got to come to grips with freedom is scary, period, right? And there are two purposes that it always comes around to. Every discussion I've ever had about Sudbury Valley School over the last 30 years, let's say, right, 45 years old now, it always comes down to the meaning of life, which is too deep. So you got to kind of come back a little bit. What is the meaning of life? Why are you doing this? What do you want for your kids? If I give you two stats, right, what I want for my son to have is adaptation and happiness. Those are the two. All the other things to me can be gotten. You can track those things down. They can be supplemented. You can engage to learn everything else later, and you should take care of your health on the way, because if you lose your health, it makes everything more complicated, right? And that's a part of giving these kids the freedom to be in the moment. They don't got to ask to use the bathroom. That would it'd be funny if Alex got into a position where he couldn't use it. He'd be like, what? Flip a table and walk out, right? That's ridiculous. So the owning of one's own body, the owning of one's own mind, learning to use it to adapt, because the internet wasn't around 20 years ago like this. We didn't have these things, these cell phones 20 years ago. Who saw that coming, right? So can the kids adapt? Because who knows what the world's going to be in another 20 years. I want them to be able to pivot and adapt, and I want them to know that he deserves happiness, and I don't got to teach him that the world is filled with struggle. The world's going to teach him that. And I'm going to be real with him as the struggle comes up. but I don't have to add that. Well, actually, maybe I did with the jujitsu. Maybe that was a supplement to the side, and to experience total open and freedom during the day, while providing opportunities to get into a discipline. But they got to be separate. You can't. That open, uncomfortable space is the most powerful magic to growing up. There's space for a kid to grow the body mind, and I want a whole adult. That's what I'm after, a happy and adaptable adult.
You
Then
said, you said, I want him to know that he deserves happiness. I think that is such a profound statement, and something that I hope more parents consider, that your children do deserve happiness, that if they are not happy in whatever learning environment they're currently in, there are alternatives to that. And there are even more alternatives to that today than there were, at the beginning of Sudbury Valley's existence in the 1960s. So that happiness is possible. Your children can be joyful in learning and in education. And certainly certainly we see that at Sudbury Valley, and would encourage parents to consider Sudbury Valley. And the website is sudburyvalley.org. Do you have any closing thoughts, Evan?
I've enjoyed this podcast. You got a talent. Appreciate that. It's fun to be interviewed and to talk about passionate subjects, and love to come back sometime. Let's play again.
Oh, I would love that. Evan Hughes, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.